VUX World. VUX World.
VUX World.
VUX World.
VUX World.
Branding with the big faces.
I love listening to it.
Kane Sims.
Kane Sims.
Kane Sims, the one and only.
Britain's finest, Mr. Kane Sims.
Dustin Coates.
I like it when you guys are together and talking about voice.
Without further ado, welcome to the show.
Righty, all right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World, the voice and conversational AI podcast where we find the brightest brains in the industry and pick their brains about how they do what they do so that you can do what you do better, whether you are building conversational applications, whether you're working within innovation or strategy teams trying to put this stuff to work to get results, whether you're engineers, designers, developers, whatever your kind of role, if you've got any interest in how to actually implement conversational AI properly, then this is the place to be. I am absolutely delighted today to welcome a guest from a company who is incredibly active in the conversational AI space, as all kind of similar companies are and have been over the last 3 years. But a company that I'm definitely interested in hearing from because they made a recent acquisition of Bold 360 recently, Genesys, and definitely taking this stuff seriously. So I am delighted to welcome Elcenora Martinez of Genesys. Welcome.
Hello, Kane. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, absolute pleasure to have you along. And as I was saying, Genesys, for those who are not aware, I'll let you kind of introduce them a little bit more properly, I would say. But for anyone who isn't aware, Genesys obviously is one of the huge contact center and cloud platform providers in that kind of CX space, and has obviously had a keen interest in conversational AI that we've seen over the last number of years. You deal with however many millions of human-to-human conversations every year, so it's only natural that this stuff would not only just become on the radar, but be a core focus for a company like Genesys. But I'm wondering whether you can explain a little bit more about Genesys, about, for those that are not from that kind of world, a little bit more about Genesys and a little bit more about you specifically and what you do there.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, Genesys is a customer experience company, and we're very focused on looking at all of those conversations across voice, across digital, across conversational experiences, and underpinning that with artificial intelligence. So we've built a modern cloud platform that has the ability to leverage both our native technology and a very strong ecosystem of partners to allow you as customers to build a lot of these experiences for your end customers that, meet them where they are. And as Kane was saying, we recently acquired Bold 360, which we are incredibly excited about because it comes with a lot of incredible live chat capabilities, a very robust knowledge platform, and just as importantly, a really great agent experience to support those agents as they are interacting with customers live. So exciting times at Genesys.
Yeah, and a bunch of talent that has managed to build what is and was one of the kind of go-to chat sort of platforms, so I don't know the details of what happened, but I'm assuming some of those staff had been brought across as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A really, really talented team has joined us, so we're very excited about that.
Nice one. And so you've moved roles recently. You were the VP of Product Management. You're now the VP of Product Marketing. What was it that you did do, and what is it that you now do?
That is correct, yeah. So in my current role, I'm the VP of Product Marketing for our cloud, our digital, and our AI offerings. And I recently moved from product management, where I was actually leading the AI team. And that includes our conversational platform. It includes some of our AI-powered routing and some of our customer engagement capabilities as well. So I'm now responsible for evangelizing all of the great work that my former team is building. But this is all still very near and dear to my heart.
That's quite a nice switch, that. It's almost like the first part is here's us building stuff, and because you've obviously got a unique understanding of it because you were involved in the building of it, now going into the other side, it's like, hey, look at all this cool stuff we've built. It's almost like it's evangelizing for the work that you've just done, which is quite, because no one else really understands it quite as much as you, do they?
Yeah, it's, this is why you need it, and this is the benefits. And on the product management side, I've had the benefit, not just in this role, but across a couple of different roles in my career, to work on these innovation type of platforms, analytics, social media analytics, and AI. And one of the things that I love about that intersection of innovation and business is introducing these new ideas, incubating them, developing, delivering them, and then working really closely with customers on the adoption of them, because a lot of this is about gaining traction, and anything around AI and digital transformation requires a little bit of that white glove to drive that adoption. And so being a part of the development of this platform, working with customers at the research phase, developing an MVP, and then seeing exactly the kinds of benefits that are now being realized is really exciting. So I do now get to talk about that all the way through the process.
Nice. It's interesting you mentioned there about driving adoption, because Genesys obviously has lots of clients, lots of customers. And over the last sort of like 3 years, certainly with COVID, and I'm sure we'll get onto some of the trends you've seen because of COVID and the impact that's had and stuff like that. But in general, a lot of that kind of call center, customer service, automation space has been, everyone seems to be aware of conversational AI now. They all seem to be clamoring for it. And so how much did you have to do to drive adoption? Because I imagine people were kind of just knocking on your door asking for it in the first place, were they?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen adoption of conversational platforms, over the last 2 years, but certainly we've seen a major increase in what companies wanted to do when the pandemic first started. One of the major surprises in adoption for us was the government and state unemployment offices, who immediately needed conversational platforms to be able to handle FAQs, knowledge, just some of those questions that would be a lot easier than being in a queue. And so examples like that were very reactionary to the beginning of the pandemic. Now that customers are very comfortable, that we've seen 40% increase in these kinds of digital interactions, now companies are stepping back a little bit and now thinking about how to operationalize, how to extend the number of use cases, the kinds of workflows that a conversational platform can facilitate. And that's the fascinating piece about adoption and how we've built the platform, is in you can have some of these very quick wins around some specific needs in the business, and then be able to scale to bring on more and more workflows that continue to support some of those digital interactions. And so it's been a very organic type of adoption and an amazing acceleration in terms of the outcomes that some of these types of deployments are driving.
Interesting. One of the things around typical product management, you kind of got me thinking there when you're saying that customers will start using it and they'll start exploring other use cases, and part of that obviously is the whole kind of like crawl, walk, run concept, where you don't want to jump in the deep end and try and build something that's overly complex. Part of it also is that actually some customers really don't know what the capabilities of conversational AI systems are yet. Are they good enough to recognize addresses, for argument's sake? Like, can we actually do these kind of use cases? And so there's a natural education that they will go through and then expand capabilities from there. But from a product management perspective, you're building the technology, you're building the capabilities to allow customers to implement this stuff. Usually, product managers have a stream of feedback from customers about a whole array of features that they want. Whereas in a space where the customer really doesn't understand what the capabilities are in the first place, how have you actually gone about building out that system, so to speak? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So let me just kind of tackle this in a couple of different ways. So when I first started working on things like persona development, I would work with our design team and I would look at these very intricate, very specific descriptions of who the user is and what they're trying to achieve. And one of the things that struck me very early on is the fact that the one thing that you can account for when you're looking at a definition of a persona on paper is that a persona is constantly learning. And I think of Excel as the gold standard, right? I've been in analytics for a good part of my career. And when you first start using Excel and how, the suite of Office tools has been introduced is you start with a save, you start with a print, you start with, a couple of buttons. And as you progress in your analytics journey, you start feeling a little bit more comfortable and exploring what is there on the menus. And the next thing you know, you're moving and you're, working on macros and you didn't even realize what that progression was. Early on in my career, I recognized the beauty of being able to offer users simple, quick wins and allowing them to have that discoverability. And so as we now think about how to approach design thinking and how to have experiences and how we deliver product, having a design organization that is guiding you through that process has been so critical for us. And Genesys has made a significant investment in a design thinking practice. So what that means is that we're working hand in hand with our designers who are looking and thinking about the complexity of building an entire conversational platform and mirroring that experience. So starting with a simple FAQ, building on to transaction bots, building up to fulfillment bots, and having this be part of the entire end-to-end customer experience. And so that whole process and the usability that we afford the bot authors, the business users that are building it, is absolutely fascinating, but extremely critical to do right in a product management, design and delivery type of process. That kind of makes sense, is where you were going with that discoverability.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So it sounds as though you kind of almost taken the same approach to building out the platform as your customers are currently taking to using the platform, starting out with something relatively straightforward, building out capabilities into more advanced situations, and then just iterating and incrementally adding on until you've got something that should cover 90% of what most customers need.
Yes, but I'll expand on that a little bit because it's, we're meeting customers where they are in terms of what they want to do in their conversational AI deployments. And that's absolutely true. But there's an element of also not making it so extremely complex that a business user can't get started. So I think that's what I want the takeaway to be is you can be a business user and you can still get started with a conversational AI platform, or you can be a bot author responsible for an enterprise type of deployment, and our conversational AI tools will still support that. And that discoverability element is there. So it's twofold.
That makes sense. And I know that we're probably getting into a bit of technicalities now. We'll maybe there's one last question on this platform, and then we'll move on because I've got another few questions. But I lost my train of thought there, funnily enough. Oh yeah. So so there's different approaches that other platforms have to creating capabilities to allow customers to build conversational applications. One approach is that you build something from the ground up. Bold 360, for example, built that NLU from the ground up. You've got companies like Speakeasy that have built the speech recognition from the ground up and the NLU. You've got other companies who have like a hybrid sort of approach, like a Cognigy, for argument's sake, or a Boost, where they do have their own NLU, but they'll use another speech recognition provider to do the speech to text, and you can plug in a different NLU at the same time. Then you've got ones who are just purely kind of open. So, a Teneo, for argument's sake, or a Zamo, which is all built on top of Microsoft. Which direction did you go with Genesys, with the Genesys platform?
It's a tricky question. It's a little bit of all of the above, but let me be more specific in my answer. So one of the things you heard me say in the intro is Genesys is a modern cloud architecture. And one of the tenets of that is to have this open ecosystem. And so when we think about our conversational AI platform, we have obviously built our native conversational platform called Dialogue Engine Bot Flows. And it is completely integrated end to end to our customer experience platform in Genesys Cloud. We are also now, and that has elements of native capabilities that we've built, and we partner with Google, we partner with Microsoft on some of the NLU, on some of the text-to-speech elements. So what you have is a technical foundation that is supporting these platforms, which are, again, like I said, natively built. In addition to that, we also really think about it conversational as an ecosystem, and we have these bot orchestration capabilities. So what that allows us to do is work with investment that companies have already made in a Google Dialogflow, for example, or Amazon Lex. And so we have the ability to have this bot orchestration that can do bot-to-bot type of orchestration that can work with our native platform and our third-party platforms. And so you see the platforms working together, and you see some of the technical elements powering what we do. Bold is an example of that. So live chat capabilities are going to leverage the native NLU that Bold has built, and that also becomes part of our whole bot orchestration capabilities. And so the takeaway from that is we never want to limit what customers are currently using, understanding that they may be certain industry requirements or certain specific use cases of why they've made investments in a certain platform. So that can certainly be leveraged. If you have made investments with Google or AWS, we can work with that. And if you're looking to get started with something that is end-to-end integrated into a single platform, then Dialog Engine Bot Flows is the answer. So there's a lot of flexibility in how we think of our conversational AI.
Interesting. I like that. What's your observations on the maturity of the market as far as customers are concerned? Look, are you having? I'm assuming your answer is probably going to be a mixture of everything. But in terms of broadly speaking, your assessment of kind of maturity, understanding, skill sets of conversation applications that you're seeing your customers have. I'm assuming some of them are going to have teams and they've been doing it for a while and they know exactly how to get started. Others are probably a little bit further behind, maybe just not really sure what they're doing. But generally speaking, if you could summarize the market from what you're observing over the last 2 years or so of actually working on the product and speaking to customers about the product itself, and then also now that you're kind of evangelizing for the product itself, you're meeting a lot of customers as well. What's your assessment of market maturity as far as kind of understanding, education, skill sets, capabilities that your customers have for deploying conversational AI?
We're definitely seeing that we're nearing a tipping point in terms of the skills in companies between what were previously just voice and are now more digital, and therefore the requirements and the skills to be able to support a conversational platform like that. We do see business users that are building some, simple type of chat workflows, but more and more we are starting to see some very advanced, very sophisticated type of bot authors that are looking at this orchestration. And so, as I said, the digital transformation is definitely making it so that we are nearing that tipping point in the these being skills in most of the companies that we talk to. And it also depends on some of the use cases, right? I think it becomes more use case specific. So the use cases around you start seeing with bots, like make a payment, update information, request information on the product. So FAQs, knowledge specifically, those are the types of bots that you can have a business user leverage a knowledge platform and quickly make available. Then you move up to a couple of more complicated where you're troubleshooting billing issues, technical issues, product replacement returns. You might start that in a self-service environment, and the complexity of it requires escalating to speaking to a live agent or either a live chat or speaking to an agent. And so those kinds of instances where there may be some human assistance required are usually where we see the more sophisticated bot authors lean in.
Interesting. It does feel a little bit as though even if it's not from a capability and skill sets perspective or an education perspective, I think that ambition has grown. I mean, some of those, we worked with a client recently who were pretty much their approach. We're concurring with what everything you've been saying, as far as, crawl before you walk before you run, all that kind of stuff. But recently, we worked with a company who was like, well, if we can't do this use case, then there's no point, because this is really, really important. And all this other stuff doesn't amount to anything volume wise or anything like that as much as this thing. And so really what we want to do is to figure out whether this is possible. Not like let's do it and pull a trigger, just let's see whether this is possible to do. So are you observing that that's the case also, that you've got customers who are coming to you with fairly high ambitions, or is everybody just kind of getting started? Like, how are you observing the ambition of what clients are trying to achieve?
The ambitions coming in are definitely high. I will say that. We recently completed a great study. The Connected Customer Experience is on our Genesys.com website, and it was a survey about 11,000 respondents. And I mean, some of the stats that came out of it, I mean, obviously we addressed, what is happening around the connected experience for the pandemic. But one of the really interesting statistics that came out of it is 70% of consumers says that a company is only as good as its service. And so when companies see this is one of those metrics that's going to drive having the high expectations, because you want to meet customers where they are. And the corresponding stat around that is that 39% of consumers say dealing with customer service is a hassle. And so in that balance of providing really exceptional good customer experience and offering some self-service tools, you have to find the balance around the quick wins. And that's why I was talking about some of the examples of where are the use cases where you can start simple, log in, check the status of a claim, check my balance. And in those high expectations, really trying to manage where you have quick wins and how you bring your customers along on this journey as well. And it'll scale to those really high expectations and those complex problems that you were alluding to. But again, if you, I mean, that's a really powerful stat, right? Not really a surprise to anyone, but 70% of consumers say a company is only as good as its service. So from a lens of a company, you have to be very focused on it.
That's interesting. That, and all the line between product and service is getting blurred more and more as well. Like, is Spotify a service or a product? And so there's probably some instances where the service is the product, and therefore it's even more paramount. But what's interesting there is you mentioned there that, what was it, 39% of people say that customer service is a hassle, and the thing around kind of AI and bots in general is that there's been a lot of bad deployments over the last 5 years, especially in the chat sort of world. And so they've gotten a bit of a bad name. Every time I say something to like a family member or a friend, I work with conversational AI, what's that? Well, you talk to Alexa, well, I kind of do that. Oh, them chatbots on websites, well, that's what, oh, a load of rubbish there. Oh, that never understands me. And so it's got a bit of a bad rap. And there's a danger there that if you do this stuff and you do it poorly, you're actually compounding that poor customer service effect. And so I think one of the areas that brands and companies and people who are brand new to this sort of space overlook a little bit is the importance of the design, the importance of the experience design of that conversation. That there's been literally in the last couple of weeks, I've seen demonstrations of bots from companies who you would think would have pretty talented designers, and they have been very, very poor, very, very bad. And so it's not just a case of deploying it. It's a case of deploying it, yes, finding the right use case, yes, start small if you want to, yes. But the experience has to be absolutely seamless. I wonder if you've got any thoughts or observations on how you're advising your customers from a conversation design and the importance of the customer experience perspective.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So one of the core tenets of how we think about this, not just on conversational AI, but really, around Genesys, is around leading with empathy. And in this particular case, when we talk about leading with empathy, we really talk about ensuring that our customers are feeling heard and understood, and we can meet them where they are. to drive those particular outcomes, right? And there's a combination of elements in there around self-service and escalation to an agent. But the most important piece around what I said is the whole notion of heard and understood. And so with that, one of the pieces of technology that I'm really proud of is now available in the market is a feature we refer to as intent miner. And what it's doing, it's actually, training a lot of these bot models to be able to understand the customer's intent so that we are getting it right the first time around, right? That we understand who you are. We use this notion of show me you know me before you've ever met me. And in any interaction, just being greeted by your name and what you have to do is confirm the intent or the outcome that you're trying to drive already makes it for a much better experience than feeling like you're constantly having to repeat yourself. And so capabilities like intent miner, capabilities like being able to understand who you are across a number of different channels go a long way in that heard, understood, and ensuring that customers don't have to repeat themselves. And so that intent miner capability also allows us to put you as a customer on the right track with the right orchestration workflows so that we can drive to that right outcome. And so there's a lot of different touch points and a lot of different elements of that orchestration that we're looking at in the design process to ensure that we're looking at delivering that empathetic experience. But it starts with knowing who you are and the intent of your conversation and the outcome that you're trying to drive. And what we find is that just those three elements make such a positive impact in that conversational, that initial conversation.
Interesting. Sounds like intent miner might be useful for not just on the front end, but also potentially on the back end for helping agents and stuff like that. We had Mark Bernstein from Balto on the podcast recently talking about the agent assist capabilities that they've got. It's absolutely mind blowing. And obviously, Genesys has got a partnership with Google CCAI. We had Anthony Passamard on the podcast a few weeks back talking about that suite of capabilities. So I'm wondering what your experiences or kind of like insights are around Agent Assist. Have you observed any customers using Agent Assist capabilities? Is that something that Genesys is offering as well? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, King, because we've been talking about the experience for the bot author to really be able to optimize and deliver, these incredible bot experience. We've talked about the customer's expectations, how they're changing, what their interactions should be, and to the extent that they're looking to self-service. But at any point in time, the agent experience is just as critical. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so incredibly excited about the Bold acquisition, because as part of our new Genesys DX portfolio, the agent experience is incredible. It is dynamic, it is responsive, and we talked about meeting customers where they are. The agent desktop is about meeting agents where they are and how they want to work, and it's incredibly dynamic. There are agents that will operate with 3 or 4 screens in front of them. There are agents that can operate with 10 screens, and that has all the information that they want. So the notion of Agent Assist or Smart Advisor is really about taking that transcription, making real-time suggestions about responses around knowledge articles, allowing the agent, we refer to it as giving customers not just what they want, but what they really need. And so it's taking that understanding of their journey. You might have a customer asking about a particular policy, and an agent can now look across to say, you have a couple of different policies with us. Why don't we look at consolidation and how that results in better savings for you, or a bundled plan? And so that empowerment of the agent to be able to dynamically respond to what a customer may want, because that information is right in front of them, just improves the overall end-to-end experience, and it improves the empowerment and what agents are now capable of doing. So we are big fans of that reactive agent experience, the Smart Advisor capabilities, and just as equally focused on improving what the agents as well as the customers.
Interesting. It is. It's an interesting area. That it's a complex one as well, because you're, as we spoke about with Mark, I recommend anyone check that out as well, because it was a very good conversation. But you're dealing with not just one stream of language to deal with. You've got the agent stream of language to deal with as well, which obviously compounds the challenge. And so it can be a bit of a challenge to implement. I know there's been a couple of case studies that Google have released, and as I said, Balto are doing some interesting stuff, but I haven't seen it that often implemented, because I do know it can be quite challenging. I'm wondering whether, is there any other challenges that you've been observing, either on the product side or now in your new role on the kind of product marketing side, any other challenges that you're observing customers or potential customers facing, that you can shed any light on how either the Genesys approach or how you're kind of helping to solve some of them challenges? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are going to be in a fairly similar position.
I would say that everything that we've been talking about, I've mentioned customer outcomes a couple of different times. So whether it's customer outcomes or it's the efficiency and effectiveness of the employees, that this all results in insights, right? At the end of the day, we're trying to measure the effectiveness of an experience, our ability to deliver empathy at scale, and trying to look at some traditional metrics to understand the ROI. So as we continue to bring AI, machine learning, conversational platforms, there's an increasing focus on the reporting and the insights, looking at the end-to-end journey, understanding where there may be choke points. It happens before conversational bot, happens during, and happens after. And so we are very, very focused on looking at that holistic end-to-end experience and providing customers with not just the reporting, but the insights to improve it. So I'll give you an example. During we have an offering called predictive engagement, and predictive engagement is monitoring what you're doing on the website, and at any point in time, if there sees a point of struggle, then it'll pop up a web message and give you the opportunity to engage through a platform, live chat, whatever it may be. So we monitor the rate at which those chats are accepted, and with that, provide the right level of insight so that an admin can then take those and tweak the campaigns, look at the audience, look at the segmentation, so that the process becomes more streamlined, more effective. And so with every single one of those types of insights, so we are moving beyond reporting and analytics and really looking to provide those level of insights that just continue to make this process more iterative and better.
Interesting. And where do you think the future of all of this stuff is heading, either for Genesys or your general observations on fast forward 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, however far you want to think about it? We've got AI capabilities that can automate front-end conversations. We've got AI capabilities that can assist back-end conversations. We've got analytics capabilities, that example you give there of understanding, the right time to serve a prompt on a chatbot widget or what have you. That over time will probably be automated. And so we've got a load of things that are kind of at play, all hanging really, aside from the analytics, although it's still featured in there, but it all hangs really around NLP, doesn't it? Natural language processing, on the voice, on the chat agent side. Where do you think the future of this kind of stuff is heading? What do you think is exciting you about where this is going?
3 years is an eternity in this space, as you can imagine. So if we're looking that far ahead, one of the things that I'm really, really excited about is how this starts becoming multi-brand use cases. We think of what's possible in commerce, to be able to sell, to be able to transact, to be able to really have some of those commerce type of use cases that are end to end with the fulfillment, with the purchase. And so we have to put ourselves in our consumer shoes. We have to put, in the end customers, what are they looking to do? When we started this conversation with usability, right? 2 apps being equal, you will go with the one that's the easiest to use. And so with digital platforms, with conversational platforms, it's going to be about, how can I do it all in one place? How can I do it all through one experience? And so to me, it's really exciting to think about something like travel, for example. How are you moving through an airline, a hotel, your credit card companies, for example? How do we start unifying those experiences to make the end-to-end workflow experience just that much easier, seamless. And so it becomes conversations around data. It becomes conversations around what you share, the profiles, the segments, the customer attributes, and it becomes a conversation around the orchestration of all of these different touch points and how we can ensure that all of these are seamlessly working so that it's, like I said, it's a end-to-end experience. So it's exciting. And I do think that continuing to grow some of these ecosystem partners, like what we have with Google, what we have with Amazon, we've recently announced a partnership with Adobe. All of those are going to become so critical to delivering these connected experiences that I was just alluding to.
It reminds me a little bit about, we've spoke many times on the podcast and written quite a bit as well around the voice assistant strategies that Google and Amazon have, and Apple to a certain extent. But what you're describing there in terms of some holistic experience that joins all of these dots together feels to me a little bit like what Google and Amazon, to a lesser extent, or maybe at least less potential perhaps than Google, is almost trying to do. You've got Google Assistant, which is the front end to, at the moment, largely search, music, YouTube content, those kind of things. But then you've got to manage your tasks within there as well, and your calendars and stuff like that. You can join a Hangout on there. If you're in the Google space, like with an Android phone and a Gmail email address, then you're part of that ecosystem. And then the only thing that's left, which is starting to happen a little bit, but not probably as fast as we would have thought, is third-party brands establishing presences on those platforms as well. And so that holistic experience from a Google perspective is perhaps Google is that front end for that holistic experience, and all of these other brands and things like that feed into that is one way of looking at the future of those platforms. I'm wondering if you've had any opportunity to think about those voice assistant platforms and how they might provide opportunities for Genesys customers in future.
Our integration, our partnership with Google obviously allows us to have these conversations with customers, right? I mentioned we integrate with Google CCAI. They're a big part of our platform. So we're constantly looking for what this ecosystem ends up looking like when you put Genesys technology with some of those partners. But I agree with what you're saying in terms of it's going to be a matter of adding all of these other use cases. I mentioned commerce, but you've got marketplaces, digital wallets. A lot of these are all elements that are going to have to come together. And it's going to be, there's going to be some data discussions, and it's going to be around, like I said, profile enrichments and segments and attributes and these touch points. But I think that's what makes it extremely exciting. And being able to have those discussions with Amazon, being able to have those discussions with Microsoft and Google as our partners gives us an opportunity to support joint customers, to support our customers that are on the forefront of what they want to deliver, and be creative about how we ideate and how we put our platforms together to support some of these use cases.
There's definitely a big question about data. That's arguably one of the things that's slowed perhaps the progress of some of these voice assistants. For example, some of the use cases that Amazon have demonstrated in the past where, you would have a conversation with a restaurant to book a table, and then that would hand you off to a cinema to book a ticket, and then that would hand you off to Uber to book a taxi. And all the while, there needs to be data shared amongst them all so that they can tie it back to the same person. And one of the things that's actually prevented some companies in the past from doing something on Alexa, for argument's sake, is that you get very little data from it, which you would argue from a customer perspective might be a good thing, because how do you get them to opt in when it's a voice user interface, etc. But it's interesting how the conversation around data and sharing and transparency and privacy and all that kind of stuff will progress. I think it's less of a concern with a contact center, because you call and you're expecting to speak to someone, and you expect to speak to the company. You've got the security of knowing that you're speaking to Tesco or Verint or whatever the company is, and whoever provides that system is whoever provides it. So I definitely think that there's barrels of conversations I think we could have around data and all that kind of stuff. But before we wrap up, I'm wondering whether I'll definitely put the link in to the connected customer experience study down here in the show notes for people to check out. Any other links to any other resources, anything else you recommend people check out to learn a little bit more about what Genesys is up to, and where can I go to actually try out some of the stuff we've been talking about?
Yeah, so check out Genesys.com as part of our app foundry. We have got some trials around our dialogue engine bot flows. You can look at that. We've got some trials around our AI-powered predictive routing platform, which is also an amazing way to leverage AI to connect customers with the right agents, right? So part of that support for the customer and the agent that we were talking about. But definitely encourage you all to look at that connected experience. It talks about customers dive into what industries they see are doing a really good job and what has the impact been across the different regions. So you're going to see that there's a difference in North America and EMEA and LATAM, for example. So some really interesting insights, either geographically or from an industry perspective.
Fantastic. Elcenora, this has been an absolute pleasure. Really, really appreciate you coming along to join us. I've had immense fun, learned a lot as always, and I'm really excited to see where this goes and the kind of use cases and solutions that your customers are building. Because, as I mentioned at the beginning, Genesys have got such reach and so many customers. One of the things that really VUX World is built on is the want and desire to turn a world full of terrible bot experiences into a world full of fantastic customer experiences. And I think Genesys have the access to the customers and seemingly the right kind of approach to start enabling that to happen. So I'm definitely interested to see how it goes. And thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. I love the opportunity to dream what a future 3 years from now would look like in a conversational platform. So it is exciting times for sure.
Nice one. Appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning in. Next week, we are speaking to Vlooper, which is a conversational AI platform. And we're going to be delving into the details of that and how you can use it to create some of the kind of experiences actually that we might have been speaking about today. So thank you for joining us. Until next time, we shall see you later. And Elcenora, it's been an absolute pleasure. Hope we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely.